The meeting room door burst open. Everyone turned. Leandro entered silently, leather briefcase in hand, impeccably dressed. Arnaldo, the director, raised his eyebrows disdainfully. "Maintenance is in the basement, friend." Laughter echoed through the room, but no one there imagined that minutes later that man would be deciding who would stay and who would leave that company. The meeting room door creaked open. The sound cut through the low hum of conversation. Leandro entered. Impeccable navy suit, discreet tie, leather briefcase in his right hand. The air conditioning blew coldly against the back of his neck. The scent of imported coffee mixed with expensive French perfume. He walked to the glass table. His eyes roamed over every face around him. No one smiled. No one waved. They just stared, as if examining a piece of furniture out of place. Arnaldo, the CEO, stood by the panoramic window. His gray hair was slicked back with gel, a Swiss watch gleaming on his left wrist. He turned slowly, as if assessing a protocol error. He frowned. He took 2 calculated steps forward. His posture was one of someone who always had the last word. "Are you lost, brother?" The voice came out loud, to ensure that everyone heard the message. "Maintenance is downstairs." Nervous laughter echoed through the room, almost automatic. A blonde woman in a white blazer arranged the papers on her desk with exaggerated haste, as if his presence contaminated the space. A man in sunglasses looked away, pretending he wasn't there. Another crossed his arms, a cynical smile on his lips. Leandro didn't respond immediately. He simply placed his briefcase against the glass surface. The dry sound of leather against material echoed louder than it should have. 2 executives glanced over instinctively. He crossed his arms. He didn't move. He didn't take his eyes off Arnaldo. He took a deep breath. Once, slowly, Arnaldo expected an apology, embarrassment, but Leandro just stood there, firm, present, occupying the space as if he'd always belonged there. Arnaldo repeated, now with barely concealed irritation, in a louder voice, "I talked to you." Leandro tilted his head. His voice came out low. "I heard." The silence that followed was no longer the same. Before, it was indifference, casual contempt. Now it was uncertainty. 3 people exchanged quick glances, trying to understand the script that deviated from the usual script. Janitor, the black receptionist sitting in the left corner of the room, held her breath. She knew that script. She'd seen where it ended. It always ended badly for those who dared stay. Arnaldo took a step forward, chest puffed out, jaw clenched. "Then get out. Now." Leandro adjusted the collar of his white shirt. Slowly. Every movement carried deliberate intent. He didn't take his eyes off Arnaldo. Not for a second. "The meeting is about to begin. And I'm not usually late." The sentence fell like a stone on glass. It shattered the entire atmosphere. A businesswoman with her hair tied back let out a short sigh. Another bit her lower lip uncomfortably. The man in sunglasses finally looked up from his cell phone. Arnaldo opened his mouth to respond. He closed it without making a sound. He tried to laugh, but the sound came out weak, artificial, out of place. He glanced around, searching for complicity in the faces around him. Some quickly looked away. Others pretended to be too busy to notice. Janiina closed her eyes for a second. She'd seen black men thrown out of rooms like this before. Some shouted, defending their right to be there. Others left silently, eyes brimming with tears. But Leandro just stayed, as if he knew something the others didn't yet understand. And the scariest thing wasn't his calmness. It was the fact that no one laughed with conviction anymore. Leandro observed each face around the table, one by one, slowly, like someone recognizing an old pattern repeating itself in new faces. The blonde woman looked away first, then the man in sunglasses. Arnaldo held her gaze for 3 seconds before blinking too quickly. Something inside Leandro pulsed. It wasn't anger, it was recognition. He'd been here before, in different versions of the same room, with different versions of the same people. His aunt's voice echoed softly in his memory. She sewed uniforms at night. her fingers calloused on the white fabric. Never bow your head to someone who thinks the world is theirs, Leandro. You don't ask for passage. You walk. Leandro took a deep breath. He adjusted his shirt collar with surgical calm, each movement slow, deliberate. Then he lifted his chin. It wasn't a challenge, it was an affirmation. He was there because he belonged there. Simple as that. Arnaldo crossed his arms, trying to take up more space than his body allowed. The posture was barely concealed intimidation, but something in his expression wavered. For a split second, perhaps because Leandro didn't back down, didn't stutter, didn't apologize for existing. The meeting is about to begin. Leandro's voice was firm, unhurried, each word pronounced with a clarity that cut through the frigid air conditioning. And I'm not usually late. The sentence wasn't asked for, it was a declaration, and that changed everything. The discomfort that had previously settled over Leandro now spread throughout the room like a coffee stain on a white tablecloth. 3 executives exchanged quick glances. A short-haired woman frowned in confusion. Another man cleared his throat softly, shuffling papers unnecessarily. Arnaldo opened his mouth, then closed it. He tried to laugh, but the sound died away. He looked around for reinforcement. No one spoke. The silence weighed more heavily than any words. Janaina, in the left corner of the room, clasped her hands in her lap. She knew that weight. She'd felt it on her own shoulders, the feeling of taking up space others think isn't yours, of breathing air they think you don't deserve. She held her breath, expecting the worst, because the worst always came. But Leandro didn't break down. He didn't leave. He didn't lower his eyes. He just stayed. Arnaldo stepped aside, trying to regain control of the scene. He gestured vaguely toward the door. "Look, I don't know who let you up, but—" Leandro interrupted, his voice low, firm, cutting. "Dr. Arnaldo." The use of his full name echoed like a silent slap, formal, respectful, but charged with something no one could quite name. Authority, perhaps, or simply a refusal to be treated as invisible. Arnaldo blinked. The skin on his neck turned slightly red. He hadn't expected to be named, to be seen. Usually, one look was enough, and the problem disappeared on its own. But Leandro wasn't a problem that disappeared. "I came to the 10 o'clock meeting. Break. And I'm exactly on time." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 3 degrees. One executive swallowed. Another looked away, feigning sudden interest in the cityscape outside. The man in the sunglasses removed his for the first time. His eyes were small, unsure. Janaina closed her eyes slowly. She'd seen this scene end 10 different ways. None of them ended well for those who stayed. But something about that moment was different. Leandro wasn't fighting to prove he deserved to be there. He just was. As if the doubt had never been his. The whispers began softly, barely audible. But Leandro heard them all. Every barely concealed word, every syllable laden with judgment. A gray-haired man turned to his colleague next to him, his voice low but not low enough. "Where did he come from?" The blonde woman in the white blazer looked Leandro up and down. Her gaze was dissecting, disgust barely disguised as professional curiosity. She adjusted her thin prescription glasses on her nose and returned to her papers with exaggerated haste, as if looking for too long would contaminate her. A young intern in a light blue shirt quickly looked away when Leandro met his gaze. Afraid of being mistaken, afraid of being associated, he shrugged and pretended to read something urgent on his tablet. Across the table, an executive with her hair tied back let out a short sigh. Discreet. But Leandro caught it. It was exhaustion, or maybe second-hand embarrassment. She bit her lower lip and crossed her legs, shifting in her leather chair. Janaina, in the left corner, clenched her fists in her lap. Her nails dug into her palms. She knew what was coming next. It always was. Screams. Public humiliation. Security called. The scene repeated like a cycle that never broke. She closed her eyes for 2 seconds. She took a deep breath. She tried not to cry. Arnaldo stood up again. He gestured with his open hands, his voice rising to a performative volume. "Look, buddy, I don't know who let you in here, but—" Leandro interrupted. He didn't shout. He didn't raise his voice. He just spoke, firmly, clearly, each word positioned with surgical precision. "Dr. Arnaldo." The name echoed through the room like a sentence. Formal, respectful, but charged with something no one could name. Silent authority, refusal to be erased. When I came to the 10 o'clock meeting, deliberate pause, about the acquisition. The last word fell like a silent bombshell. 3 executives exchanged quick glances. The blonde woman stopped shuffling her papers. The gray-haired man frowned in confusion. Acquisition? What acquisition? Arnaldo blinked 3 times in a row. Too fast. His mouth opened slightly. He tried to laugh, but the sound died before it could be heard. He looked around for confirmation. No one confirmed anything. They just returned equally blank stares. The mood changed. Before, it was confident hostility. Now it was doubt, uncertainty creeping around the edges of the silence. Someone cleared their throat. Another adjusted their tie unnecessarily. The businesswoman with her hair tied back looked at Leandro with slightly wide eyes. It was no longer disgust. It was belated recognition, or perhaps fear. Janaina opened her eyes slowly. Something was different. The script wasn't following the usual script. Leandro was still standing, still firm. And for the first time in years working at that company, she saw white executives hesitate, back down without moving. Arnaldo tried to regain control. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Acquisition? What acquisition? The voice came out thinner than intended, almost defensive. Leandro didn't respond immediately. He just stared at him. 5 full seconds of heavy silence. Then he tilted his head slightly to the side, almost a smile. Almost. The one that starts now. The air conditioning seemed to blow colder. No one moved. No one spoke. The silence stretched into collective discomfort. The entire room held its breath without realizing it. Janaina felt something rise in her chest. It wasn't hope, not yet, but it was the first crack in the wall that had always seemed insurmountable. And there, in that white, tense silence, something began to shift. Leandro blinked slowly. The meeting room disappeared for 3 seconds. Quick cut, small hands mopping the floor. The strong smell of bleach burned the nostrils. An old radio played softly in the corner. Leandro was 7 years old. His mother was on her knees beside him, scrubbing the white marble floor of an empty office, the same kind of marble that now lay beneath his feet. She stopped. She wiped the sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. She looked at him with those tired but steady eyes. "One day you'll walk through those buildings with your head held high, Leandro. Not to clean, to give orders." He never forgot. The promise stuck to his chest like a scar that no longer hurts but never fades. Leandro opened his eyes. The marble beneath his Italian leather shoes was cool, shiny, expensive. He took a deep breath. The air conditioning carried the scent of imported coffee. No more cleaning products, but the memory still echoed. Clear, vivid. Arnaldo kept saying something. His voice faded into background noise. Leandro no longer heard the insult. He heard his mother's promise. He felt the weight of the dignity she had woven into him, stitch by stitch, over years of enforced silence and double the work. Memory didn't weaken him. It anchored him. Every dismissive word Arnaldo uttered now sounded hollow, fragile, because Leandro knew something no one in that room imagined. He wasn't there by chance. He wasn't there by luck. He was there because he paid the price. Twice the price. Thrice the price. Maybe. He adjusted his tie slowly. He ran his hand over the fabric of his suit. He felt the quality of the cut. Every stitch was impeccable. Every detail was thoughtful. It wasn't ostentation. It was a statement. Material proof that promises whispered in empty rooms could become concrete reality. And then Leandro smiled. For the first time since he'd entered that room. It wasn't a smile of mockery, nor of anger. It was recognition of how far he'd come, of how many closed doors he'd passed through, of how many Arnaldos he'd faced before that one. Janaina saw the smile from afar. Something in her chest tightened, because she recognized it. Not the smile, but the weight behind it. The weight of carrying ancestry and future simultaneously, of being a bridge between what was and what can still be. Arnaldo took a step forward, trying to regain control of the scene. "You still haven't answered. Who authorized you to come in here?" Leandro slowly turned his face. He stared at Arnaldo with a calmness that was more frightening than any shout. His voice was low, firm, full of a story no one there knew. "My mom." Silence. Arnaldo frowned, confused. "Your mother?" Leandro didn't explain. He didn't need to. He just kept looking. And in that look were decades of struggle, of resistance, of promises kept against all odds, against all the systems designed to prevent that very moment. The executive with her hair tied up swallowed. The intern stopped pretending to read the tablet. Everyone felt it, even without understanding, that something bigger than that room was happening there. Leandro opened the leather briefcase and took out a document. He placed it on the glass table with almost reverent care, and the sound of the paper touching the glass echoed like a bell. Respect was never about asking permission. It was always about taking up space that was already yours from the start. Arnaldo lost his patience. His jaw clenched. His hands curled into fists at his sides. He took 3 long strides toward Leandro. His posture was a threat thinly disguised as authority. "I think you confused the auditorium with the Human Resources Department." His voice rose. Performative. Each word spat with studied condescension. He turned to the other executives, arms open, a forced smile on his lips. "Let's focus, people. We have important decisions to make before this turns into a fair." Nervous laughter returned, but now weaker, hesitant, like echoes unable to sustain their original sound. The blonde woman forced a smile. The gray-haired man cleared his throat softly. No one looked directly at Leandro, but everyone felt his presence like a physical weight in the air. Leandro didn't move, didn't respond. He just remained there, standing, firm, occupying the space with a calm that seemed to defy gravity itself. His eyes fixed on Arnaldo. No anger, no fear, just observation. Arnaldo noticed. For the first time in 20 years running the company, no one was laughing with conviction anymore. The audience was faltering. The show was losing momentum, and he felt the ground shifting beneath his feet without understanding exactly why. The silence stretched. 5 seconds. 10. 15. The room cooled gradually. The dark-haired executive fiddled with her cell phone uncomfortably. Another woman straightened her already perfectly aligned papers. The intern glanced at the door, calculating distances. Janaina bit her lower lip until it hurt. She wanted to scream. She wanted to stand up. She wanted to tell Arnaldo he was wrong, but fear stuck in her throat like glue. Fear of losing her job. Fear of being next. Fear of confirming that solidarity costs too much in places like this. Arnaldo took another step forward. His voice grew louder, more aggressive. "Will I have to call security?" The threat hung in the air like toxic smoke. Some executives shifted uncomfortably in their chairs, but no one spoke, no one intervened. A complicit silence, the kind of silence that allows violence without dirtying one's own hands. Leandro tilted his head slightly to the side. A smile almost touched the corner of his lips. It wasn't mockery, it was bitter irony, recognition of an old pattern. He'd heard that threat before, in different versions, with different words, but always the same script. He took a deep breath, slowly. He adjusted his cuffs with deliberate movements, and then he spoke. His voice was low, calm, sharp as broken glass. "Call away. Break. It's going to be interesting." The sentence fell like a stone into a still lake. Silent ripples spread across the room. Arnaldo blinked 3 times. Too quickly. His mouth opened slightly. He hadn't expected that. He'd expected retreat, fear, submission. But Leandro just stared at him, with that deadly calm that was more frightening than any scream. The gray-haired man exchanged a quick glance with the executive in the white blazer. Something was wrong. The script no longer followed the familiar script. and no one knew what to do when the underdog refused to accept the role. Janaina closed her eyes. A tear fell, not of sadness, of anger, of exhaustion, of painful recognition of how many times she had seen that scene repeat itself, and how many times she had remained silent. But perhaps the most frightening thing wasn't Arnaldo's threat. It was the fact that Leandro didn't seem intimidated. The living room door opened. No one was expecting it. The sound of the doorknob turning cut through the silence like a knife. All heads turned at once. A man entered. Impeccable gray suit, navy blue tie, black leather briefcase in his left hand. He didn't look at anyone. He walked straight to Leandro. His steps were firm, deliberate. The sound of his shoes against the marble floor echoed like a countdown. Arnaldo frowned. The blonde woman put down her pen. The gray-haired man paused in the act of grabbing his coffee. Everyone watched, confused, tense. The man in the gray suit stopped beside Leandro. He held out a sealed envelope, cream paper, a red wax seal on the flap. Elegant, official. He bowed briefly, almost imperceptibly. Then he turned and left without a word. The door closed with a soft click. Leandro held the envelope with both hands. He turned it slowly between his fingers. He felt its weight, the texture of the expensive paper. There was no rush in his movements. Every gesture was cinematic, concentrated silence. Arnaldo took 2 steps forward, trying to see from afar. "What is that?" No one answered. Leandro opened the envelope with surgical calm. He slid his index finger under the sealed flap. The sound of ripping paper was the only noise in the room. He pulled out the documents. 3 stapled sheets, dense text, official stamps at the bottom. Inside were the company's acquisition documents, signed this morning at 8 o'clock. By him, Leandro da Silva, new majority owner, 65% of the shares, total control. An assistant choked on her coffee. Her hand shook. Dark liquid ran down the side of her white cup. Another executive dropped her cell phone on the table. The sound of the phone hitting the glass made 3 people jump slightly in their chairs. Arnaldo paled. The color drained from his face in 2 seconds. His lips parted. His eyes widened. He tried to read from afar. He craned his neck. He took another step. But the distance didn't allow for details. Only the growing sensation that something monumental had just happened. Leandro read the documents silently, line by line, unhurriedly. His face revealed nothing, just serene concentration. Then he folded the papers carefully, placed them back in the envelope, closed the flap, and looked at Arnaldo. Their eyes met. 3 whole seconds. Neither of them blinked. "Now can we start the meeting?" Leandro's voice was low, calm, but laden with a weight no one could measure. It wasn't a question. It was a statement disguised as courtesy. The silence that followed was unlike any before. It wasn't hostility. It wasn't discomfort. It was shock. A belated recognition. The kind of silence that comes when the ground drops out from under your feet, and it takes you 3 seconds to realize you're falling. Janaina brought her hand to her mouth. Her eyes welled up, not from sadness, from something she couldn't yet name. Hope, perhaps, or justice, or simply the feeling that for the first time in 10 years working at that company, the impossible had just happened right in front of her. Arnaldo opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. No sound came out, just empty air. His jaw locked, his hands trembling imperceptibly at his sides, and Leandro remained there, standing, firm, with the envelope in his hand, waiting. Sometimes a change doesn't need words, just paper, ink, and absolute silence. Leandro walked to the end of the table. Slowly, each step echoed against the marble like a sentence being read in a silent courtroom. He stopped. He placed the folder on the glass surface. The sharp sound made 2 people shift in their chairs. Then he crossed his arms. He took a deep breath and spoke. "Leandro da Silva," deliberate pause. "New owner and CEO. I took over this company today at 8 o'clock in the morning." Stone silence. Absolute. The air conditioning continued to blow cold, But no one felt the cold anymore, only the shock spreading through the room like an invisible gas. Arnaldo opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. No sound came out. His face fluctuated between white and gray. The blonde woman put down her pen. Her hand trembled slightly. The gray-haired man took off his glasses, cleaned the lenses unnecessarily, and put them back on. A mechanical gesture. A desperate attempt to process information that didn't fit into the known reality. Leandro continued, his voice firm, each word positioned with surgical precision. And the first meeting will be about respect, about how we treat the people who come into this room. He pointed to Janaina in the left corner. All eyes followed the gesture. Janaina froze, her eyes wide. Tears formed at the edges. She's worked here for 10 years, and I've never seen her invited to a meeting. I've never heard her name mentioned in an important decision. I've never seen anyone ask her opinion on anything. The silence was now collective awkwardness, shame creeping in around the edges. 3 executives lowered their eyes. The dark-haired executive bit her lip, staring at her hands. The intern swallowed. Janaina tried to hold back her tears. She couldn't. One fell, then another. But they weren't tears of pain. They were tears of recognition, of being seen for the first time in a decade, of existing beyond functional invisibility. Arnaldo finally found his voice. It came out shaky, defensive. I didn't know you were... Leandro cut, dry, firm. He didn't know, but he acted. That's the difference. The sentence fell like a hammer, final, irrefutable. Arnaldo took a half-step back, instinctively, as if the words had physical weight. Leandro took the documents. He opened them to the first page. He showed the official stamps, the signatures, the numbers that proved it all. 65% of the shares, total control, final decisions are now mine. He looked at each person, one by one. Some held his gaze. Most looked away. And I will repeat one last time. The first decision will be about respect. The gray-haired man cleared his throat softly. The woman in the white blazer shuffled her papers nervously. No one laughed anymore. No one smiled. The entire room breathed pure tension. Janaina wiped her tears with the back of her hand. She took a deep breath. She tried to regain her composure, but something in her chest had changed, something that 10 years of forced silence could no longer erase. Leandro closed the documents and put them back in the folder. He finished in a low but firm voice. You can feel free to leave if that's a problem. No one moved, but everyone felt the weight of the choice being placed before them. If you've ever been judged before you even opened your mouth, if you've ever been treated like you didn't belong in the place you've achieved, tell us in the comments. We want to hear your story, because respect was never a favor. It was always a right. Leandro placed the documents on the glass table. The sound of the paper against the surface echoed louder than it should have. He smoothed the sheets with the palm of his hand, slowly, deliberate, every movement charged with intention. You will listen to me. Break. And you will respect me. Because now you have no choice. The sentence wasn't a threat. It was a statement. Simple, direct, irrefutable. Arnaldo tried to hold Leandro's gaze. 3 seconds. 5. Then he looked away. His shoulders slumped slightly, his posture of authority crumbling brick by brick. Leandro looked at each person, one by one, slowly, unhurriedly. The blonde woman lowered her eyes first, then the gray-haired man. The intern feigned sudden interest in his cell phone. The executive in the white blazer shuffled through papers without reading anything. The room divided. Those who had laughed at first were now silent. Those who had looked away were now trembling. But Denise, the dark-haired executive who hadn't laughed from the beginning, looked up. There was something new in her gaze. It wasn't pity. It was pride. A recognition of belated justice finally arriving. Janaina took a deep breath. Tears still wet her face. But now she was smiling. For the first time in 10 years at that company, someone like her was in charge. Someone who knew the weight of being treated as invisible. Someone who understood the price of occupying spaces others think don't belong to you. Arnaldo tried to speak. His voice cracked. We didn't. That wasn't. Leandro raised his hand. A simple gesture. Arnaldo fell silent. Immediately. Like the conditioned reflex of someone who always responded to hierarchy. They weren't intentions. They were actions. Leandro pointed to the door. And actions have consequences. The silence that followed was different. It was no longer discomfort. It was fear. A real fear of losing position, of losing power, of facing for the first time what it means to be on the other side of the table. Denise stood up slowly. She walked over to Leandro. Everyone watched. She held out her hand, firmly. "Welcome, Mr. Silva." Leandro shook her hand. He didn't smile. He just waved. But the gesture said it all. Mutual recognition. From someone who understands that true allies don't emerge from applause, but from courageous silence. Janaina wiped away her tears. She straightened her posture. For the first time since entering that room, he felt like he was taking up real space. Not decorative. Not functional. Real. Leandro picked up the folder and closed it with a sharp click. The meeting resumes in 5 minutes. He looked at Arnaldo. "Whoever wants to stay in the company, come back. Whoever can't respect differences can leave now." No one moved, but everyone felt the weight of the choice being placed there. It wasn't about agreeing. It was about deciding what kind of person you choose to be when no one else is looking. Arnaldo tried to stand. His legs gave way slightly. He leaned against the table. He took a deep breath, his face pale, his hands trembled, and Leandro simply waited. Because true power doesn't need to shout. Share this story. There's someone out there who needs to know they're not alone in this struggle. That sometimes resistance is simply continuing to occupy the space that was always yours. Justice doesn't make noise. It just arrives. Leandro ended the meeting with a simple gesture. He closed the folder. He put away the documents. He straightened his tie. Then he walked over to Janaina. Everyone watched. The silence was thick, expectant. He stopped in front of her. He extended his hand. Janaina looked. She hesitated. 10 years of invisibility don't disappear in seconds. But something in Leandro's gaze told her this was real. It wasn't an empty gesture. It was a promise. She raised her hand, trembling slightly. Their fingers touched. Then they squeezed, firmly. Janaina felt something break inside her chest. It wasn't pain. It was relief, recognition, dignity restored after years of being treated like functional furniture. "You start tomorrow on the executive board." Leandro's voice was low, but clear, each word uttered like a promise fulfilled. Janaina tried to speak. She couldn't. She just waved. The tears returned. But now they were different. They were the future, possibility, concrete hope. Leandro picked up the folder. He looked back one last time. The entire room watched him. Some with shame, others with fear. Denise with silent pride. Arnaldo, his face still pale, trying to process what he had just lost. When you confuse presence with subservience, you reveal a lot about the world you want to maintain. The sentence wasn't an accusation, it was a mirror. And everyone who heard it saw themselves reflected in it. Some looked away. Others swallowed hard. The discomfort now had a name. It had a form. It had consequences. Leandro walked toward the door. His steps were firm, unhurried. Every movement carried a sense of earned dignity. He didn't run. He didn't hide. He simply walked out. Because true power doesn't need external validation. Downstairs, on the ground floor of the building, a black boy in a school uniform watched everything through the glass window. He had seen Leandro enter an hour earlier. He saw the security guards hesitate. He saw the doubtful looks. Now he saw Leandro leave, his posture erect, his gaze firm, taking up space without apology. The boy smiled. He didn't know exactly what had happened up there, but he felt it. He recognized it. Something in the world had changed, even if it was just a brick, a room, a company. It was the beginning. Leandro walked through the revolving door. Sunlight hit his face. He took a deep breath. The street air smelled different from the artificial air conditioning inside. It was real, alive, full of possibilities. Behind him, inside the building, Janiina looked out the window. She saw Leandro on the sidewalk. She saw the boy watching, and she understood. This wasn't just about her, or about Leandro. It was about everyone who would come after, about each door that would become a little easier to open, about each room that would become a little less hostile. The boy kept the image in his memory. Someday it would be him entering that building, and when he did, he would remember that moment, that man, that silent promise that existing is not a crime, taking up space is not an invasion, and dignity is not something you ask for. It's earned. If this story touched you, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, activate the notification bell, and share it so that more people can reflect and become stronger.